Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of L'Exclusive, the podcast produced and hosted by Paper Street Web Design and Marketing. As always, I'm your host, Nancy. Thank you for listening with us again. And I'm joined by Pete, our CEO and General Guru. Hi, Pete.
Hello. Hello.
And then our Vice President and Internet Marketing Director, Alex.
Hello.
As we promised in our last episode, we've been talking a lot about AI and SEO. So this is kind of like the part 2 of the last episode that we did. So with this episode is about what we already talked about, which is a lot about how AI is different from traditional search and what practices are best and how the original traditional searches are still, those techniques and things like that are still effective. So tune into that part. But if you're just tuning into this part, we're going to be talking specifically about AI and content, because I think hands down, the biggest question we keep getting asked is, what can we do with AI content? So let's kick this off, get this started right away, and start with the biggest question, the one we get asked all the time. Does AI content work?
It's actually a yes or no question, so I'm going to hedge my bets. We just read a search engine land study, so I want to give them credit for this. But they just produced a study basically about AI content and really detailed. We'll put a link to it in it so you can see the full study. But basically, they came up with the analysis that it works initially, but doesn't over the long term. So to get very specific, AI content will get indexed. It'll gain traffic fast, but it fails to sustain the rankings long term. So they did a massive experiment over the course, I believe, a year. And 3/4 of the traffic got indexed in like about a month. It generated a massive amount of impressions. It grew their impressions. But then after month 3, only about 3% of the pages remained in the top 100. So it was a really quick rocket ship to get the AI content indexed and then gone. And I've actually seen that on accounts too, to where clients have, lo and behold, given us a lot of content within like 48 hours. So like we're like, hey, you need to produce these 30 pages, which would usually take like a month or so to produce. And then like 48 hours later, we have like 30,000 words of content, which is like a crazy amount. And it worked for a while, 3 to 4 months, and then suddenly it stopped working. And we told the client, hey, this isn't the content we were expecting to try to publish and everything like that. And it worked for them. So they were like, cool. But then it stopped working. So we had to go back in and rewrite all the content.
Yeah, to kind of reinforce what Pete's mentioning, like in that same study, like it was around 70% of all the total traffic that came in the first month for, 2.5 months. It basically grew. It was like a big spike, and then the growth slowed, and then that visibility essentially dropped, and it dropped sharply. And it makes sense because as we discussed in our first podcast in part 1, it really is about, it was like a weak authority. There wasn't really anything that kind of showed unique insights or anything like that. It's missing all of these trust signals that we talk about, and that we went over pretty extensively. So again, it's that initial high that it gets. And like one of the things that I, again, kind of really like to refer to from that perspective, it's like almost like did it fail the audition, so to speak, and so it needs that really good valid information to basically carry on and to further. So I know that they went on, they added new AI content later, and by doing that it increased the impressions that they saw by like 17 and 19 times, times 17 times 19, if you will, for the older pages. But again, the gains were short term. So again, another term that I've said to a lot of our clients is like, think of it as like that sugar high, it basically like masks the underlying kind of ranking issue, which is that it doesn't have that expertise and that credibility that it actually needs to kind of maintain for a long time. So
I was cheesy in the last episode, but I'm going to say it again because it really matters. You can't set it and forget it. So if you do this, what this study was showing was if you add all of this content, see those gains, you think, woohoo, AI content solved my problem. I'm fantastic. If you're not checking your analytics, check your Google Analytics, check your own rankings. You can Google yourself, ask a question that a client might ask, see if you've sustained those rankings. Because a lot of times, what the search engine land is a site we refer to quite a bit, is as this study showed, it did not sustain those efforts. So again, if you saw those ranking efforts and you're one of those people that were like, yes, this worked wonderfully for me, Go back in and see in a month, in 2 months, you'll probably find what the search engine land found was that it didn't sustain anything. And SEO, again, we said this in the last episode, we say this in almost all of our episodes, whether it's SEO or AI SEO, AI AEO, all of that, it's always going to be a marathon. It's not once you've ranked, you rank forever and will stay at number one. There's constantly going to need to be efforts so that you keep going. And with content, that is particularly important.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of those key efforts, I think, is actually going back to old posts. So I believe in the study they're doing that now. They're going into older posts and seeing if the same effects will happen. And so we've been doing that at Papershoot for years now, is take an old post that was ranked high, go in, make edits, put up the new publication date to more recent. We all know from our last episode, actually, AI loves fresh content. The last 90 days, definitely loves things that are within the last year. Get an old post that is good, update a few things, make sure it's current, make sure it's accurate law, and update it. And what I think you're going to find is those posts again rank higher and will do well because they probably have the authority from years ago and backlinks, especially if the article was good to start with. And then it's going to have more backlinks because it's updated. It'll have more current recent content, which will pass the filter for AI, and you'll rank high. So that would be my takeaway from this big article is maybe not produce AI content to start with, but take a look at your last 100 top blog posts over the last 5 years and re-update those.
Absolutely. And you have to make sure that that content has the specific parameters that AI and Google really both are looking for, the key aspects to your content. Okay. And what are those key aspects to the content? So let's start with authority.
Yeah, first one's authority. You got to have backlinks and external validation in order to rank. Without these, you're just publishing content out there. So whenever you publish something, make sure you have a strategy to go out and get at least a few links from other people, social media, listicles, directories, things like that. Get backlinks. If you're not, you're kind of wasting your time and money. So.
Yeah. I would add on to that is, again, as we mentioned in the first part of part one, if you will, expertise and credibility. I mean, again, as simply as I can summarize it, AI can't replace firsthand experience. Think about it like that, right? So, I mean, again, we need, the credibility, the real world experience, especially on critical items, especially within the law, right? So, and again, another thing that I always like to kind of focus on is that Google doesn't hate AI, it hates low value content. And so when we can then show that expertise and show that credibility, that's actually what makes a difference.
Yeah, the third thing I would say is the differentiation. Make sure your content is not rehashed. It needs to have new insights. Pages that just are rehashed struggle to stand out because most likely someone's already rehashed that information. So you're just basically spinning content. Spinning
Yeah.
content's been around for a decade or maybe even 15, 20 years on Google where people just put up, articles and just retyped them, re-edited them, and that's been around for a while. Don't do that. Publish new insights and you need to have your different content, and a little bit different take on things. That's what's going to get, ranked high in AI search.
Yeah, and the fundamental principles, as we kind of referenced also in part one, are still, the foundation. It's still what's tried and true. There needs to be that structural integrity. Like there needs to be internal linking. It needs to be good organization. There needs to be a clear hierarchy. Because again, it's not just Google that's then scanning the site. It's the AI agents. It's looking through. It's looking for those page relationships. It's seeing that there is a, structural integrity that is again, it's like a good foundation that this is all built off of. So,
Yeah, actually, real big thing on that. Pro tip here, internal linking matters.
mhm,
Anytime you post an article, make sure
mhm,
you're linking to other past articles, make sure you're linking to your practice areas. If you are writing an article about estate planning, that's a guidebook, and you put it on your blog, make sure your estate planning service page, practice area page links over to it. Make sure your bio links over to it. Internal linking matters. Your website could have, 200, 400, 500 pages. You're telling Google what's important on your site by linking to it from your home page, your main practice area pages, your actual main pages. The more links you have internal to a page, Google scans that and knows that, and Gemini knows that, which is Google's AI engine. And I'm about guaranteeing, ChatGPT, OpenAI, Claude, Perplexity, all the other ones know that too. So.
yeah. Yeah, to Pete's point, it's giving all of every one of those a helping hand to say, hey, I'm not like a one-trick pony. I don't have
Yeah.
this one page. I'm multifaceted. Look at all look at all this depth, and I'm helping guide you to these other pages that matter.
You can actually run an analysis on that on internal linking and show what your top internal link page is. Most likely it's your homepage, but every once in a while it's not. But most likely it's your homepage. And then there you can decide what should be your most linked page. Is it your core practice area on estate planning? Is your core practice area on automobile accidents? Is it corporate law? Whatever. Take a look at that. If you're signaling to Google that it's a practice area you're actually not trying to focus on, then you need to update your internal linking and your offsite linking too.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that what I see a lot of our clients make a mistake with too much with this, and the same thing is if you're writing just one article on a topic and then not allowing there to be internal linking on it, and you just don't just address it anywhere else, there's nothing else to go by. So it's just this one article that's just out there. I did one on it. That's it. I'm never going to talk about it again. There's no signals. There's no internal linking. But you also have to keep in mind the human nature of all of this, where having those internal linking and that content differentiation, that's only going to help increase your client's engagement with your website and your material. So if you have more than one page on a topic, you come across as the legal expert. You come across as the person, wow, they can really answer my questions. So they see that. And by putting things like those internal links, you're helping them navigate to show, oh, I can get here, I can do this. So just a quick thing that I wanted to just harp in on is just this AI practices, these SEO practices, it's not just for those things. These will actually help you have a better website over time.
Here comes
All
a
right.
incoming analogy again. Think of it as a closet. Think of like, and we've all seen it. Somebody opens up a closet where it's just packed full of everything. There's a mess, there's clutter. It's all clutter. It's literally noise. And that's how Google and AI agents see a website. Now cut to in a closet that we open up and everything is beautifully organized and wonderfully organized. That's how, Google and AI agents see it too. So the clearer that you can make it, that clearer reference, might you have that page in that clutter? Sure, but it can't find it. But if you internally link, you're organizing it can find it nicely and easily.
All right. We opened the show with the big 50-cent question that everybody wants to know. All right. We're going to hit the next one. Okay. Because there's a lot of misinformation about this. And that is, does Google penalize AI generated content? All right. And that's a loaded question. It really is, because Google in itself does not penalize your content solely because it was made by AI. But what the stance is, what these search engines' stance is that they're going to be focusing on the quality over the origin. Okay. So if you think about it, it's kind of a fancy way of answering the question where it seems like, well, they're not saying Google will be penalized, but have you really ever seen AI content written in a way engaging, new ideas, really specific information, especially for topics that are common answers? So if you're answering like a legal question, a frequently asked question, chances are that AI generated content is going to be the same thing, like a canned answer everywhere. So what do we make of that, guys?
Yeah, I think if the AI content's spammy and unoriginal, is not going to rank. So there's a slight purpose of doing it to where you could show the focus of your pages that for like FAQs and things like that, but it's not going to rank. So there's no real way around that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, maybe I jumped ahead of myself there in saying this earlier, but I mean, like, and I'll repeat it because it's worth mentioning. Google doesn't hate AI and obviously the AI agents don't hate AI, but what they hate is low value content. And again, it goes back to like the EAT model. Do you have that real world experience? Do you have that demonstration of expertise? Do you have all these other trust signals that we were talking about building into these pages? So it's not just the generation, like you just mentioned, Nancy. It's not just the generation of that content, but it's the depth, it's the quality, it's what's behind it that basically matters. That's what's I think critical.
And again, it's what we said before. It may work initially purely generated by AI, but the data just showed from the search engine land report, it's not
Mhm.
working long term.
Yeah, exactly. It works initially. Like I said, the sugar high. Think of it that way. You get that sugar high, and then it comes crashing back down. So
All right. Then addressing another question our clients have been asking us is they're concerned about the whole zero click search thing. In other words, people are concerned that if their AI content is just getting summarized, it may not lead to conversions and things like that. And it may not be, it's kind of just pumped out information rather than, being indexed for quality and things like that. So, Alex and Pete, you probably explained that a little bit better, but how do I prevent AI from stealing my traffic? How do we stop these zero click searches?
Yeah, I mean, AI has been doing it for, or not AI, but Google's been doing the zero click strategy for years now. The goal was to keep people on Google, obviously keep the ad revenue going and so forth. So they've taken all the answers and put them into the answer engine. Now it's, Gemini's getting mixed into search results where it's at the top again. So it's more real-time searches. You're not going to stop that. If you put your content online, it's going to be scanned. It's going to be put into an AI engine. It's going to be put into Google, ChatGPT, Bing, Claude, all of them out there. What I would say is make sure that if you really want to block it, you can have tools that have to be logged in. That would be the key, is have some kind of login system to where your content has to have a username and password to get into. Ultimately, that might be able to be get into once agentic agents get online and so forth. But the if you put it behind a paywall or something like that, then it's effectively blocked. But then you're also not getting the traffic to your site as well. So, but templates, tools are all good skill sets to have. If you put them into a PDF, maybe some JavaScript, it might make it a little bit harder for the engines to parse it. But ultimately, if it's online, it's online. So
Yeah. And I would add to that, like Pete was saying, like on the, using partial information of almost like kind of dangling the carrot, so to speak, of like just saying, here's what you can do to kind of get more in-depth information. There's in-depth case studies that can be done with like private data. Again, it'll go back to what I mentioned earlier, which is, AI can't replace firsthand experience. So in other words, like write for people, not just algorithms, write for the specific aspects of, like, again, playing on that EAT model that we keep talking about, the EEAT, which within that you can then take some of that expertise and do like case insights. You can do real world examples on the authoritativeness side. You can do, legal citations or maybe even things that were like press mentions or something. So there's all these opportunities where you can do that. But even in the expertise side, it's real authorship. It's again the real world experience that AI isn't necessarily going to know, and that's some of the information that can get picked up, from not necessarily prevent the stealing, if you will, and utilizing the traffic. It drives people in, they download that, and yeah, that's real traffic. So,
yeah, to follow up on the idea of what could drive people back to your website to where it can't be summarized in like a answer engine, is calculators, tools, things like that, things that are part of your business process on your website. So it could be actually filling out, an estate plan.
right,
It could
right.
actually be filling out a workflow that data has to be given over to the attorney. That type of stuff can't be pulled and summarized. They might be able to summarize the overall pages about that, but they're not going to be able to create that workflow on answer engines. So they're going to guide the person to your website to fill that information out. That's what you want. So producing a tool set, again, it comes back to creating something unique. If you do that and you do it via a tool, then you're going to get the traffic to your website.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, you don't want to hide from zero click searching too. So don't try to avoid not having content that everybody needs to know when it's generalized out there, because that is still what people want to know. So you can't just hide from it or try to avoid that kind of content in general. We don't want to sway you the other way. But if you want to have things that are distinctly your own, and should have something on your site that differentiates you, whether it's your case studies, whether it's a tool that you came up with, whether it's a legal analysis that's purely your own, those are all fantastic for branding and thought leadership, and you should have those, as well as the content that, again, people by human nature are just going to need to see on your site if they're visiting your site. So don't go swing too far in the other direction on that one.
Right.
Yep.
All right, and then let's talk about, again, what should you do? Okay, you've listened to our two podcasts on this topic specifically. You've listened to our other shows about AI and SEO and things like that. So Let's talk about how can we incorporate AI into like your standard content workflow? What should this look like? What should our clients listening to us do with this information? What's the steps for them to follow?
Yeah, I'll start us off. I'll kind of give you the agenda of what we'll talk about for the next like 5 minutes. Our standard process is to audit the existing content, then plan out new content, then write the content, then publish, and then do some extras as well and tracking and so forth. So again, audit, plan, write, publish, and then extras slash tracking. I'll start with the audit process. The content audit process obviously starts with your existing content. Review your website, review all your assets, see what we have for your site. Second thing is we, analyze your competitors. Give us your top 3 to 5 competitors. Usually top 3 is enough. See what they have, see what gaps we have. The third thing is go to actual AI search and regular traditional SEO search and see what's working. Make sure we have pages about those and that they're better. So that's the top first thing is about audits is, your own content, competitor content, and then actually what's working in search and AI.
And once you have that audit completed, it's essentially the foundation that you're then building off of. So then you can plan, it basically sets the trajectory, a word I use often. It's the plan of how you move forward with that. So, like Pete mentioned, you do that competitor audit. Well, that inherently gives you the answers of saying, well, here are the gaps. So you figure out the gaps, the content gaps. You basically say, this is what they have. This is what I don't. This is what I need. This is what's important to me. This is what I can flush out to basically make that much more in depth. You then plan those pages that need to be written. Again, it's probably the core content pages, it's the pillar pages. But then within that, there's probably also the ideas of like monthly content that has to go out there. And from that side, I would argue heavily, how cool is it to be able to use AI to then basically say, here are my competitors, here is the blogs that they write. How often did they write? I want to do better than that. It can figure out that rhythmic pattern of how often they're doing a deployment schedule of getting content out there. And then it gives you literally in 30 seconds, it gives you that outline of here is the plan that we need to post towards. So, you can use AI not only for that production schedule, but then you can also use it to generate those ideas. Again, as we mentioned just a few minutes ago, you may not want to lean on it so much that it's kind of generating everything for you, so to speak, but you can generate those ideas. Then you, as a human, leverage off of those ideas and can utilize it to write naturally, to add that authorship, to add that expertise, and then go from there.
Yeah, and I'll admit that I was a bit of a snob when it came to this sort of thing. I had to take a while to get onto the AI train for content generation because, again, I've been writing for a very long time. And it's just initially when it came out, I was like, no way, there's no way AI could come up with ideas for me. It's going to be cheap, it's going to be awful, things like that. Well, I'm humbled to say that I was wrong, and it is, you may have an idea and it may be a great idea. So when you use AI to help plan your content, it'll take your great idea to an even better one because it's not only taking what you thought of, but what also other people are looking for, what your competitors are doing, things like that. So that generational aspect with that is what you should be using AI to do. But that's where the buck stops, so to speak. You need to actually write the content by way of a human. So whether it is an attorney writer, whether it's someone in your office, whether it's you yourself, you shouldn't rely on AI to just write that content. Use the ideas, use the brainstorming, absolutely, fill the gaps that you didn't already see, but then write in a natural voice because your natural voice will come across as more authentic. It'll help you stand out in Google and things like that. So again, write by way of a human somehow, some way, whoever it is, pay a writer, you do it, have that. And then also do a human editor as well, because you can do a fact check with AI or Grammarly and things like that. Those are great for checking grammar and things like that. It's great to make sure you have a unique voice, but it never hurts to have a human review what you've written to make sure that it's easy to understand. It's answering the questions that a human wants to hear and things like that. So in the actual execution model of your workflow, you need to have human hands heavily involved.
We've done the audit, we've planned out everything, we've done the writing. Next step 4 is they actually got to publish the article. So Alex, you want to talk about the first few points?
Yeah, so on the publishing side, once we get that content out there, one of the things that again I would say harkens back to really some of the basic fundamentals as like we were talking about like internal linking, right? Like That's a fundamental basic that has been out, on web design for forever. It goes back to artwork, making sure that there's good artwork that's embedded, that the artwork that even as the file names are actually created really matters. And again, these are things that go back to the core fundamental principles of like just going through and naming even like a JPEG. For example, we've seen things where it's like, image underscore 123 dot JPEG sort of thing. But in reality, you want to probably name that JPEG something that is actually kind of speaks to what would be picked up and naturally weaving in keywords that are part of that. And again, the artwork that's actually embedded in there too matters. It speaks on a little bit of that human level as well. That also kind of speaks to, again, the formatting perspective of it. Just as we've mentioned, I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit in depth in our part one podcast, but just the formatting of the architectural side, the indexing side, the schema side, the technical coding side. Again, think of it this way: it just needs to be easily digested by Google and by the AI agents in order for that formatting to show up. So,
Yeah, the format, it really matters. You're right about that. And just, is it readable? Like, would you
yeah,
want to read it? Like, if you're
right.
just slamming all the text together in a real like 12-point font and it has no
Yeah.
subheads, no spacing, things like that, that's gonna be a boring read. Everyone's gonna get bored. You don't want this to be an opinion of a court where it's kind of hard to read. Put in some
I,
subheads, put in some photos, put in some things like that. That makes it exciting to read.
I'm going to interject again really quickly with yet another analogy, and I say this all the time. Imagine somebody putting a whole big baked potato in front of you, and somebody goes, "Oh, no way, I couldn't eat all that." But if you break it up into bite-sized pieces, and you could probably double that in the amount of French fries that you eat, right?
Actually,
So to Pete's point, you don't want just huge blocks of content and everything. You want to break it up. You want those bite-sized pieces. So, sorry.
yeah, better yet, make that baked potato have all sorts of toppings on it, and you're good to
Yeah,
go too. So
exactly.
toppings in this case could be categories. If you're publishing a blog post, make sure you have categories set up and they're on your sidebar, and people can categorize the information. That you can use tags as well. Title tag. So the title tag in WordPress defaults to your actual headline. Change it and make it be a little bit different. And put in an actual title tag that someone's going to read, because that's going to be the search engine result that they want to click on. So you can up your click-through rate via that. Your URL matters. Again, the URL defaults to pretty much the headline. Eventually, a character limits out, but change that. Make your URL a lot shorter. If your headline is 10 words long, get your URL down to 2 or 3 words. Um, Make sure you have schema on the page. But those are all little technical things. Publishing is easy, but it can also be more advanced when you get down to the technical details. Once you're done publishing, your job's not done. You need to social media. Make sure you get backlinks from third-party sites. Those are two critical things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just important to realize, like I said, that you can have the content, it could be done by you, but sometimes maybe you just need that editing help from somebody who's got that technical experience. Like I said, not to toot Paper Street's own horn on this one, but it's the thing where clients will send us content and then say, hey, can you optimize this for us? Because on a human level, you probably can't teach yourself all of the things for schema, title tags, meta descriptions to make it yourself where you need to be right off the bat and learn it by one YouTube video or this podcast, which we hope is very helpful and educational, but it's not everything and all of it. So don't rely on it completely. You may need some consultations to make sure that you have that technical aspect, because it's not as easy as it sounds. We wish it were, but it's not. All right. And then once you've got that public content published, don't just stop there. Don't just stop there. Turn your content into that wow factor. Add those extras. Okay. What are those extras? Add an infographic. If you have like something that's very difficult to understand, if it's a particularly difficult legal topic, making it visual will always help someone out, because they could be like, oh, I could follow this chart, or I could see it broken down into chunks into this infographic. Here again, that's only going to be a win because AI don't necessarily be able to duplicate that, especially if it's like a PDF or something like that. Number one. Number two, you get backlinks to things like a really helpful infographic. At the same token, you're going to want to have video, have some videos to make it, more interesting. Break down your content, have a client see you speaking, have them hear you. So not only is this content just regurgitated on the web, it has authenticity to it. It has a person attached to it. Add it to YouTube, YouTube, there you go. Now you've got social media content. So your content doesn't have to just stop there. And don't think that just simply having a blog post is the end of your marketing. There's ways to take it further. And then the last two most important aspects are going to be about tracking it to see what content is actually working.
Tracking is just like mission critical from that perspective. I'm just again, if you can't measure it, then you can't make any decisions off of it. So just track. That's just like the fundamental basic principles of marketing.
The final thing I would add is the update schedule. Make sure that you're checking back on your tracking analytics after 90 days, 120 days, 180 days, and updating the article as needed to.
All right. Well, hopefully this was a short but sweet follow-up to our last podcast. Hope we answered your big burning questions about AI generated content, because we know that they pop up quite a lot. All right. But thank you for listening. Tune into our other episodes to learn more. And as always, tune in for the next episode. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Alex. Have a good day,
Alex.
everybody.